It's striking to consider that George W. Bush is the most recent individual to have occupied the Oval Office, who also served in the military.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point to start with.
Okay, let's really get into this. Today, on the Deep Dive, that's precisely what we're doing. An in-depth exploration of the pivotal aspects of George W. Bush's life and career.
We're drawing from readily available biographical information, think curated insights from Wikipedia that span his various life stages.
Right. Our goal for you is a clear yet comprehensive understanding of his background, the key choices he made, and the defining events of his time, ultimately shedding light on his presidency.
And just to be crystal clear, we're focusing on George W. Bush, often called Bush Jr. or Dish 43, to differentiate him from his father, George H.W. Bush.
Exactly. Important distinction. So where do we start? His early life.
I think that makes sense. What's fascinating to observe is the path that ultimately led him to the presidency. It truly begins with his formative years and education.
Born into a pretty prominent family, obviously.
Right. A family with significant public presence. His academic journey took him to Phillips Academy in Andover for high school, then Yale University, where he focused on history.
Yale, like his father.
Correct. But perhaps most uniquely, and a distinction he holds among all U.S. presidents, is his Master of Business Administration degree from Harvard Business School, the only president with an MBA.
That business background is certainly a unique element in his profile, yeah, and something we might see reflected later on.
Definitely.
But before that MBA, in his 20s, he was flying warplanes with the Texas Air National Guard.
That's right.
Now, this period has seen its share of discussion. There have been suggestions of, let's say, preferential treatment, maybe linked to his father's political standing.
Yes, those allegations surfaced. And questions about his flying aptitude and even some instances of missed attendance came up, too.
And wasn't there something about a physical exam?
Uh-huh. There was also a temporary grounding because he missed a required physical exam. This brings up an interesting point about the potential influence of family connections in shaping opportunities, a theme that often surfaces in biographies of prominent figures.
Sure, that makes sense.
It's also important to remember, though, that the Department of Defense released his full service record back in, I think it was June 2005.
Right, so the documents are out there.
Exactly. They're part of the official archives available for public review. And ultimately, he received an honorable discharge from the Air Force Reserve in November 1974. This detail sometimes gets less focus than the controversies.
Absolutely. So after his time at Harvard Business School, he gets into the oil industry.
A very Texas path, as you might say.
It really is, isn't it? It's interesting how different professional experiences shape a person. And speaking of different experiences, baseball. He was a co-owner of the Texas Rangers.
That's right, the Major League Baseball team.
And here's where it gets really interesting. During his ownership, the team actually won its first division title in 1996.
It certainly adds another layer to his background, getting involved with a classic American sport and achieving success in a very public way, outside politics.
Must have been a totally different kind of pressure and reward.
I'd imagine so. And what's also noteworthy, even though it didn't pan out, was that he nearly became the MLB commissioner.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it suggests an interest, maybe ambitions, beyond just the oil business at that point.
Okay, so from baseball back to, well, not back to, but into politics.
Yeah.
He runs for governor of Texas, wins in 94.
Right. He served from 1995 to 2000.
And this period, it really gives us a window into his political style and priorities before hitting the national stage.
Exactly. As governor, he definitely made his mark. Several significant legislative accomplishments. We saw tort reform, those changes to the civil justice system trying to limit lawsuits.
Okay.
He also oversaw increased funding for education, setting higher standards for schools, plus reforms in the criminal justice system.
And the wind power thing.
Yeah.
That seems slightly counterintuitive, maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially considering later energy debates. He signed legislation that really pushed Texas towards becoming a leader in wind-generated electricity.
How did that work?
The law basically required electric retailers to buy a certain amount of their energy from renewable sources.
Huh. That's definitely part of his record, then. He also used a budget surplus for a pretty big tax cut, right?
A substantial one, yes. Texas's largest at that point, $2 billion.
Wow.
But his focus wasn't only on tax cuts. He also extended state funding for organizations dealing with things like alcohol and drug abuse and domestic violence.
Okay, so a mix of fiscal conservatism and some social program support.
You could say that. However, his term also saw a notable shift in juvenile justice. The age for trying juveniles as adults for serious crimes was lowered.
To what age?
Down to 14.
That's a significant change. And then there's the issue of executions during his governorship.
Yes, a very high number, 152. More than any previous modern Texas governor.
Which, understandably, led to considerable criticism, especially about how requests for clemency were handled.
Absolutely. His stance on capital punishment became a very defining aspect of his governorship for many observers.
And environmentally. You mentioned the wind power, but what was the overall picture?
It drew contrasting views. Critics pointed to lower environmental rankings for Texas.
But supporters?
Supporters would highlight things like increases in teacher salaries and better student test scores as positive outcomes during his tenure. So yeah, a mixed bag depending on what you looked at.
What's really striking, though, is his re-election in 1998. He won big, right?
With a record 68% of the vote, made him the first Texas governor elected to 2 consecutive 4-year terms.
That kind of support, it suggests pretty high approval within the state then.
Definitely. He enjoyed high approval ratings during that second term. And it's interesting to note some of the cultural and religious dimensions, too, like proclaiming June 10th, 2000 as Jesus Day in Texas, encouraging service.
Right. Actions that clearly connected with a specific part of the electorate.
For sure.
Okay, so let's pivot to the 2000 presidential election, which was, well, anything but ordinary. How did he get the nomination?
Certainly. He started strong, winning the Iowa caucuses, looked like the frontrunner.
But then New Hampshire happened.
Right. He lost the New Hampshire primary to John McCain, and by a pretty wide margin, about 19 points.
Ouch. So how did he recover?
He managed to regain momentum, and after the South Carolina primary, he was back as the clear frontrunner. But it's worth mentioning the tone of that primary campaign.
Nasty.
It was described by the Boston Globe as historically negative. The New York Times used words like smear tactics.
Yikes. That suggests a really competitive, maybe divisive primary season, setting the stage for the general, I guess.
It certainly did. And then came his choice for vice president, Dick Cheney.
Which was seen as a bit surprising at the time.
It definitely generated discussion. Cheney had immense Washington experience, former chief of staff, congressman, secretary of defense.
Wasn't he leading the VP search committee for Bush?
He was, actually, which added another layer to it. They were officially nominated at the Republican convention.
So, facing Al Gore in the general election, what were Bush's main campaign points?
He consistently hammered on his record as governor of Texas, and he criticized Gore on issues like gun control and taxation, trying to paint himself as the more conservative choice.
Then came election night and the outcome. Well, that became a whole saga.
Absolutely. Historic, highly debated, you name it. Bush won 29 states, but it all came down to Florida.
Incredibly close.
So close it triggered an automatic recount. That initial machine recount still showed Bush ahead, but barely.
And then the legal battles began.
Exactly. A whole series of legal challenges unfolded over more than a month, going all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Which leads us to the infamous Bush v. Gore ruling.
Yes. On December 9th, the Supreme Court stepped in. They overturned a Florida Supreme Court decision that had ordered a manual recount of certain ballots.
What was their reasoning?
Their core argument was about equal protection. They said using different standards for recounting ballots in different Florida counties would violate the 14th Amendment. So they stopped the statewide hand recount.
And a result.
The machine recount results stood. Bush won Florida by just 537 votes out of about 6 million cast.
Wow. 537 votes. That's razor thin.
Incredibly so. And despite winning Florida and thus the presidency with 271 electoral votes to Gore's 266.
One D.C. elector abstained, right?
Right. Bush had actually received fewer individual votes across the country. About 543,895 fewer than Gore.
Making him the first president since Benjamin Harrison in 1888 to win the Electoral College while losing the popular vote.
That's correct. An incredibly divisive outcome, and it really threw a spotlight on the quirks and potential issues within the Electoral College system.
So he takes office in 2001 under these really contested circumstances. He had an initial domestic agenda, but then September 11th happened.
That's the undeniable turning point. His priorities, his entire presidency were fundamentally reshaped by those attacks.
Everything changed after that.
Completely. But it's still important to look at some key domestic issues during his terms, even with the huge focus on national security, like the 2008 financial crisis. That had a massive impact.
Oh, absolutely. It felt like it touched everything. What were the main triggers for that crisis?
Well, the information points to a perfect storm, really. A housing market downturn, the subprime mortgage mess.
Right, lending to people who couldn't really afford it long term.
Exactly. Often with those tricky adjustable rates. Add in soaring oil prices and other factors, we saw huge job losses through 2008.
I remember those numbers. Grim.
Over 500,000 jobs lost in November '08 alone, the biggest monthly loss in 34 years. By year-end, 2.6 million jobs gone.
So what did the Bush administration do in response?
They passed a $170 billion economic stimulus package. Tax rebate checks, tax breaks for businesses, trying to pump money back into the system.
Did they see it coming? Was there any attempt at regulation earlier?
It's interesting. The administration had actually pushed for tighter regulation of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac back in 2003.
The big mortgage giants.
Right. The House passed something, but it stalled in the Senate. Some Republicans worried about government overreach.
And then later,
in September 2008, as things imploded, the government had to take over Fannie and Freddie. Lehman Brothers collapsed. AIG got a massive bailout.
it showed the difficulty of reacting to a meltdown like that.
And fueled the ongoing debate about how much government should intervene in the market. It was widely called the worst crisis since the Great Depression.
Looking back, did the administration acknowledge any missteps?
Well, former Fed Chair Alan Greenspan later suggested stronger housing market regulation earlier could have helped. Others felt maybe more power for Treasury and the Fed to scrutinize things sooner, plus more congressional oversight might have made a difference. Bush himself proposed a big financial rescue plan later on to buy up troubled mortgage assets.
Okay, moving away from the crisis, what about health initiatives during his presidency?
He launched a national strategy for pandemic influenza in 2005, trying to prepare for future pandemics.
Seems prescient now.
It does. And maybe most significantly, he signed the Medicare Part D prescription drug benefit into law.
That was huge.
Hugely controversial, too. Some called it the biggest expansion of the welfare state in decades, with massive long-term costs projected.
But he also opposed some health spending.
Yes, he vetoed the expansion of the state children's health insurance program, or SCIP. He worried it was a step towards socialized medicine.
And any other health-related laws?
He did sign the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act in 2008, GNA, protecting people from discrimination based on their genetic info.
Let's talk Social Security reform. That was a big push for him, especially in the second term, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, a central plank of his domestic agenda. The system was facing projected long-term deficits, so he proposed major reforms.
And the core idea was?
It included the very controversial idea of partial privatization, creating personal Social Security accounts.
Allowing people to invest part of their payroll taxes themselves.
Exactly, directing a portion into privately managed investment accounts.
That sounds like a tough sell politically.
It faced huge opposition, mainly from Democrats dead set against any form of privatization.
Did he try to build support?
He did a 60-day national tour, conversations on Social Security, trying to sell it to the public.
Wow.
Public opinion actually moved against the reforms during that tour. Eventually, the Republican House leadership decided not to push it, and after Hurricane Katrina, the whole initiative basically faded away.
Shows how hard major entitlement reform is. Now, environmental policies, always a hot topic.
Definitely. Right at the start, he opposed the Kyoto Protocol on climate change.
Why?
He cited concerns that it exempted many countries and could hurt the U.S. economy. He did issue some executive orders on energy projects and environmental reviews.
And the Clear Skies Act, what was that?
Introduced in 2003, it meant to amend the Clean Air Act. But critics, many environmental experts, argued it would actually weaken the original law, easing some pollution rules and extending compliance deadlines.
Did it pass?
No, it ultimately failed in Congress.
But he did do some things seen as environmentally positive.
Yes, most significantly. In 2006, he designated the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands as a national monument, Papahanaumokuakea.
That created a huge marine reserve, right?
At the time, the largest in the world, widely praised by conservation groups.
And his stance on climate change itself.
He publicly acknowledged global warming was real and serious. But he maintained there was still debate about its main causes. So his overall stance remained pretty controversial.
Okay, what about energy policy specifically?
In his 2006 State of the Union, he had that famous line, "America is addicted to oil."
I remember that.
And he launched the Advanced Energy Initiative, aiming to boost research into alternatives. He kept pledging to reduce reliance on foreign oil.
Did he take concrete steps?
Well, in 2008, with gas prices soaring, he lifted the executive ban on offshore drilling, though that was somewhat symbolic because other laws were still in place. He also committed $2 billion to an international fund for clean energy tech.
Let's touch on stem cell research, a very sensitive issue.
Highly sensitive, ethically charged. He supported research using adult stem cells, but opposed using embryonic stem cells due to ethical objections.
So what was his policy on federal funding?
In 2001, an executive order allowed federal funding, but only for research on existing stem cell lines created before that date. The utility of those specific lines was debated by scientists.
And he used his veto power on this issue.
Yes, his very first presidential veto in 2006. He rejected the Stem Cell Research Enhancement Act, which would have expanded federal funding for research using lines derived from destroyed embryos.
Immigration reform, another massive challenge during his presidency.
Huge. The U.S. saw a big increase in immigration in the early 2000s, and nearly half were estimated to be unauthorized.
What was his approach?
In 2006, he proposed a temporary guest worker program for undocumented immigrants already here, coupled with tighter border security.
And the big legislative push.
He strongly backed the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Act of 2007. It aimed for a pathway to legalization for some, a guest worker program, and more enforcement.
But it didn't pass.
No. It faced intense public debate and failed in the Senate. Opposition was fierce, especially over the legalization or amnesty provisions.
And then there was the controversy over firing U.S. attorneys. That blew up politically.
It really did. In his second term, the Justice Department dismissed 7 U.S. attorneys. Accusations flew that the filings were politically motivated.
What did the White House say?
They maintained it was based on performance. But the controversy grew, leading to the resignation of Attorney General Alberto Gonzales and other top DOJ officials.
Congress got involved.
Yes, investigations, subpoenas. President Bush invoked executive privilege at one point. An internal DOJ investigation later concluded some firings were inappropriately political, but not criminal.
Okay, let's shift focus entirely to foreign policy. Before 9/11, his platform was different, right? More focused on Latin America, less on nation building.
Absolutely. He talked about a more humble foreign policy, but September 11th, 2001, that changed everything.
It became the defining event, reshaped his presidency, U.S. foreign policy, everything.
Totally. His address that night, his visit to Ground Zero with the bullhorn, incredibly powerful moments that rallied the country.
And the immediate response led to
the initiation of wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, central parts of the broader war on terror. It really raises that question of how pivotal events can just completely redirect a presidency.
The war in Afghanistan started quickly. The goal was dismantling al-Qaeda, finding bin Laden. How did that go initially?
The Taliban regime in Kabul fell quickly by late 2001. But the hunt for Osama bin Laden in the Tora Bora Mountains in December 2001, that failed.
Why?
The administration later suggested maybe not enough U.S. ground troops were committed to that specific operation. And of course, bin Laden wasn't found and killed until May 2011 under Obama.
And the Taliban.
They regrouped over the following years, becoming a persistent insurgency, a long, evolving challenge.
And then the Iraq War. The reasons given for that remain hugely debated.
Extremely so. There was a 2010 report from the Center for Public Integrity alleging the administration made hundreds of false statements about the threat from Iraq beforehand.
Primarily about WMDs.
Weapons of mass destruction, yes. The failure to find any WMDs after the invasion became a massive point of controversy and really damaged public trust.
The war on terror also brought big changes: domestically surveillance, interrogation policies.
Right after 9/11, Bush authorized the president's surveillance program. It let the NSA monitor communications without warrants, a big shift from previous law.
That faced legal challenges.
Considerable ones. It was eventually brought under judicial oversight and later replaced by the PRISM program, though PRISM had its own legal framework and controversies.
And interrogation. The enhanced techniques.
Yes, the administration authorized techniques like waterboarding. This sparked intense debate domestically and internationally about whether these methods were torture.
Were they legally justified at the time?
Based on opinions from the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel, yes. But those opinions were later withdrawn. Bush even vetoed a bill that would have banned waterboarding.
And memos about these techniques came out later.
Yes, secret memos authorizing them were eventually declassified and released.
His foreign policy also involved confronting nations like North Korea over its nuclear program.
He famously labeled North Korea, along with Iran and Iraq, as part of an axis of evil. He strongly opposed their nuclear weapons development.
Were diplomatic efforts made?
There were attempts at denuclearization talks, agreements where North Korea pledged to shut down reactors, but ultimately they restarted the program. It remained a major challenge.
And Syria.
Syria faced increased sanctions over concerns about potential WMD programs and support for terrorism.
There were also some dramatic moments during his foreign travel.
Yes, the attempted grenade attack while he was speaking in Tbilisi, Georgia in 2005. And who could forget the shoe-throwing incident in Baghdad in 2008?
Memorable, for sure. Let's not forget his judicial appointments. They have a long-lasting impact.
Absolutely. His biggest impact there was on the Supreme Court, appointing John Roberts as Chief Justice and Samuel Alito as Associate Justice.
Alito replaced.
He filled the vacancy after the nomination of Harriet Miers was withdrawn.
And lower courts.
He appointed a significant number there, too. 62 judges to the federal courts of appeals and 261 to the district courts, shaping the judiciary for decades.
Culturally, politically, he had a very distinct image, didn't he?
He definitely projected that sort of folksy American cowboy image,
Yeah.
often tied to his Texas roots, his ranch in Crawford.
An image his supporters liked, but others parodied.
Exactly, widely parodied in the media, which led to the term Bushisms for his verbal slip-ups.
Were there serious challenges to his authority, like impeachment talk?
There were calls for impeachment, yes, related to surveillance, the Iraq War justification, treatment of detainees. But Speaker Pelosi famously declared it off the table, so it never gained real political traction.
And his approval ratings?
They fluctuated wildly, started very high, especially after 9/11, but declined significantly by the end of his second term. His final approval rating was quite low.
How was he viewed internationally?
It was really diverse. Strong support in some places, like Albania, surprisingly, but significant criticism in many other parts of the world.
So after leaving office in 2009, what has he been up to?
He published his memoir, Decision Points. In it, he called keeping the country safe after 9/11 his biggest accomplishment.
And biggest failure or regret?
The failure to get Social Security reform passed.
Has he stayed involved in politics?
He's offered commentary now and then on ISIS, on the U.S. political climate more recently. He also took up painting and published portraits of courage, featuring his paintings of wounded veterans.
A surprising post-presidency pursuit for some.
It was. He's also reacted publicly to major events like the Charlottesville rally and the January 6th Capitol attack, and he's attended subsequent presidential inaugurations.
So finally, let's talk legacy. It's still very much debated, assessed.
Absolutely. It's complex and contested. Supporters will point to his post-9/11 counterterrorism policies, Medicare Part D, the PEPFAR program for global AIDS relief as major successes.
While critics focus on...
Critics often highlight the Iraq War, the handling of the 2008 financial crisis, environmental policies, the interrogation methods, among other things, as major shortcomings.
How do historians see him?
There's a view among some historians that he was a very consequential, even transformative president. They might point to the significant tax cuts, but also the huge expansion of the federal government in homeland security. It's a mixed and still evolving picture.
Indeed. George W. Bush's impact was certainly wide-ranging, from owning a baseball team to leading the country through these massive global events.
A really diverse career path leading to the presidency.
So here's a thought to leave our listeners with. Considering that pre-presidency career, the MBA, the oil business, being governor of a huge state like Texas, how might those specific experiences have uniquely shaped how he tackled the, frankly, extraordinary challenges he faced as president?
Or maybe reflecting on these very different views of his legacy that still exist, what single aspect do you think will ultimately stand out the most in the long run?
Definitely provides a lot to think about. We really encourage everyone to explore the information we discussed further and consider all the different perspectives surrounding his time in office.